Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening for part 2 of our wellness series as we learn to thrive and survive during challenging times. My name is Susan Columbi, and on behalf of Addith Israel, Beth David, Beth Emmett, and Beth Tikva, I welcome you all tonight to hear Terri Klein, teacher, author, speaker, and life coach. Just a reminder that this program is being recorded and to please remain on mute. But if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box. I would now like to introduce our speaker. Terri Klein holds Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Education degrees. She's a formally trained coach with Coactive Training Institute. Terry's an author and a blogger. She's the creator of Mind Scholar, her dynamic science-based and action-oriented curriculum. Through this program, she helps people, especially anxious and exhausted overthinkers, to get unstuck, to become more emotionally flexible and live more fully, even through adversity. Tonight, Terri will introduce skill sets to help us communicate more consciously. Welcome, Terri.
Good evening and welcome to all of you. How exciting to be interacting with people from 4 different synagogues across Toronto. It really feels so nice to be able to bring the community together in this way, to learn. Thank you for showing up here this evening and for investing in your self-care. It really is critical at this time. And given all that there is available right now, I thank you for being here with me and part of our mental wellness series. So tonight's topics are very important, but not always easy to talk about or practice. They may even feel a bit heavy at times, so just give yourself permission to notice everything that's arising within you without judging it. And because the topics flow one into the other, I'm going to suggest that we keep all the questions and comments for the Q&A after the presentation. Just give me a thumbs up if the volume is good, please. Can you hear me all right? Okay, wonderful. So I like to begin every class with just a little body scan so that we can relax and release some of the tension in the body. It also helps to quiet the mind and helps us to become present and get into what I call a learning state. So just get comfortable in your chair and find your posture and close your eyes. And let's begin by taking 3 deep breaths in through your nose and slowly out through your nose. And as you breathe in and out, feel the weight of your body sinking into the chair and feel your belly softening and expanding. Feel your neck and shoulders loosening and your eyes and mouth forming a gentle smile. As you breathe in and out, bring awareness to your toes and focus on relaxing them. Now focus on your feet and thank them for carrying you, for keeping you balanced and grounded. And when you begin, you may feel distracted or your thoughts may wander. And when this happens, simply return to your breath, relaxing the muscles of your toes and feet. Now begin to extend this relaxation exercise upwards by relaxing your calves and thighs. And as you breathe in, think about inflating a balloon within your belly. Continue to breathe in and out as you release the tension in your legs. Your mind will keep thinking thoughts and you don't have to judge them. Just return to your breath and begin again. Your breath is your anchor. Next, relax the muscles of your abdomen and chest. Think about the gift of your sacred body and the miraculous interplay of cells, organs, and systems. Breathe in gratitude and appreciation. Next, think about relaxing the muscles all along your spine. Then move up to your shoulders and neck, which hold so much stress and tension, and breathe in and out as you relax and release. Now relax the muscles of your face and your scalp. Notice the tension in your eyebrows, jaw, and tongue, and let it go as you focus on your breath. Feel your senses engage. Notice sounds, smells, and sensations within your body. If you notice yourself absorbed in a thought, label it internally by saying thinking, then gently come back to the breath and begin again. Now take a moment to acknowledge your all-powerful mind and brain. Breathe into that beautiful space between your ears. Relax and release. And now focus on your heart and think of relaxing your heart muscle as you slowly breathe in and out. Imagine it expanding and opening. Feel tender, loving kindness. Imagine your body now completely relaxed and experience the sense of simply being. And when you are ready, open your eyes. I thank you for sitting together with me. It is so important to check in with your body periodically throughout the day. That is to consciously choose to pause, take a few deep breaths, and slow things down. I call it the sacred art of pausing, and always remind people of the power of the pause. It's a very powerful and important self-care practice, but especially these days. Also, finding 5 or even 10 minutes for a daily meditation is a very wise investment to quiet the mind and relax the body. There are so many apps to choose from, and the benefits are endless. Okay, so let's begin. Bruce Lee wrote, "We don't rise to meet our expectations, we fall to our level of training." I agree wholeheartedly. When times are tough, we seek out our best practices and trainings, so we must continue to build our emotional toolkits and fill them with the most helpful and skillful trainings. So for a few years now, I've been studying what I call conscious communication. And what that means is simply learning how to communicate more intentionally and with greater awareness. I also have an interest in relational mindfulness, which is really just learning how to speak and listen more mindfully and relate to others in a more attentive way. Now, the desire to learn more about these did come from a very personal place. I was noticing that I was a bit too focused on all of my inner work, that is, on self-regulating and building a better relationship with myself, and not focused enough on my outer work, which is on building better interpersonal skills and more positive relationships with other people. So what I've learned from experience with myself and my clients is that this is a very common trap. But I do believe that in order to feel truly satisfied in life, prioritizing the inner work has to be balanced by prioritizing the outer work. You see, self-awareness and self-management are hugely important, but equally important are empathy, social awareness, social management. Altogether, these are the 5 components of EQ, which is emotional intelligence. And what we're doing here tonight is helping to build our emotional lives. So the good news is that the inner and the outer work, well, they can actually completely merge. We can weave them together in what I call a continuous cycle. So we can look inside in order to become more mindful and grow our inner practices, but then we can look outside to become more mindful and grow our outer practices. And then we can look inside again and go deeper. And then we can look outside again and go deeper. And this is essentially how we evolve as human beings. Now, human beings are relational by nature. And so much of our suffering and stress is in fact people related. The spiritual leader Ram Dass once said, "If you think you're enlightened, just spend a week with your family." Now, given that many of us have now spent more than a year at home with our family, I think we can get a sense of the importance of this inner and outer balance. And this too is especially important as society reopens and we are now finding ourselves once again face to face with others. Although much of our suffering is people related, many of us have not been properly trained in how to navigate our way through interpersonal difficulties. You see, our parents didn't necessarily have the skill set to teach us things like emotional flexibility, mindfulness, or self-compassion, so we certainly can't blame them. Our schools seldom prioritized our emotional lives because that's the educational system. Our workplaces rarely intervened, and so the consequences of this lack of training are very apparent in how we communicate with each other. Oftentimes, especially when we're feeling triggered and reactive, we cannot communicate effectively. We either yell, shut down, avoid, become rude. We have not learned how to properly deal with conflict and disagreement, how to have difficult conversations, or even how to apologize. So consequently, when we listen, we have a hard time not interjecting and adding our own thoughts and opinions. And although we have two ears and one mouth, we tend to actually talk far more than we listen. I love this quote from Winnie the Pooh. If the person you're talking to doesn't appear to be listening, be patient. It may simply be that he has a small piece of fluff in his ear. Clearly, many of us have some degree of fluff in our ears, and we can benefit from learning the skills for deeper listening. Now, although things are improving, and society is beginning to reopen, this pandemic has been long and hard, and many of us are still feeling more stressed and anxious than usual, which makes us more argumentative and reactive, which makes us more critical, judgmental, and even hostile. And in those moments, less kind and less compassionate. The problem is clear. The greater the overall tension, the greater the distance, miscommunication, and feelings of disconnect between people. And unfortunately, according to the research, interpersonal relationships have been hard hit during this pandemic. Please offer me a little visual cue or just a nod to let me know if any of this resonates with you. Okay, good. We're all human beings going through a very similar shared experience. So tonight you're going to learn how to communicate more consciously and safely. You're going to learn about a deeper kind of listening. You're going to learn the meaning of a sincere apology and how to offer it. And you're going to learn some truths about forgiveness that you may have not heard before. Okay? Communication, the word itself, communication, has been defined as a process of interaction or exchange, creating understanding. I'm not sure if everyone really understands that that is in fact inherent in the definition itself. We are communicating. The underlying intention of good communication is to help us to better understand each other. So let's just begin with some basic principles of good communication so you can appreciate the difference between good and not so good communication. So when you have to communicate something critical to someone, it's so important to criticize the behavior and not the person. But unfortunately, our tendency is to move from criticizing behavior right into belittling character. So we have to understand that difference. And if your intention is to be heard while communicating something difficult to someone, the research says opt for brevity, say it shorter, keep it simple. Our tendency is to overtalk, and overtalking on your part leads to under listening from the other person. They say that the higher the word count on an emotionally loaded subject, the faster the other person shuts down and or becomes defensive. It's also so important while communicating to reflect and mirror back what someone has just said to you before responding to it, and to use words like I rather than you that point a finger, blame, and accuse. Another important feature of good communication is this: seek first to understand and then to be understood. Get curious rather than judgmental. Now, good communicators are considered good communicators because they allow people to feel seen, heard, understood, and feel emotionally safe. How, you wonder? Well, most good communicators are also very good listeners. And because listening is such a hugely important part of the communication process, this is where I'd like us to first place our attention. So I'd like you to just close your eyes for a moment. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes at various points in this presentation. Why? Because it's actually easier to concentrate and reflect with your eyes closed. It's far less distracting. But if you find it difficult, by all means, just keep your eyes open. So close your eyes if you may. And I'd like you to bring to mind someone you know who you consider to be a really good listener. And consider this: what characterizes good listening? What are the qualities of heart and mind that make someone a good listener? Do any of these qualities resonate? Someone who is present, interested, curious, compassionate, patient, never interrupts, inquisitive, tender. Now think about your own listening practice and think about how you would answer some of these very important questions. Do you understand that listening encompasses much more than just how you hear others? Do you listen to your own body? Do you pay attention to what it needs? Things like rest, movement, food. Do you listen to your heart? Do you give yourself permission to feel all of your feelings, even the uncomfortable ones? Do you listen to the yearnings of your soul? Are you aware of your deepest aspirations and longings? You see, deep listening also includes paying attention to our own minds and bodies. Rumi wrote, "Do you make regular visits to yourself?" What he meant was, do you pause throughout the day to check in with yourself, to pay attention to your needs? Okay, now while your eyes are closed and you're reflecting, I would like you to think about your interpersonal listening skills. How do you relate to and listen to other people? Are you curious? Do you seek first to understand or first to be understood? Do you ever wonder what another person might be going through? Do you ever ask questions like, what's it like being you? What matters to you? And now I'd like you to think about a recent conversation you had with someone, and I'd like you to consider this. Did you practice good listening, or did you have an agenda in place? Did you want the conversation to go a certain way? Did you want the person to experience you in a specific way? Did you want their approval? Did you want to prove something, get something, fix something, be right? Now, I want you to think about a particular conversation when you were being criticized. Did you feel like you were being accused of something, attacked in some way, or that you needed to defend yourself? What's the first thing you wanted to do or to say in response to what you heard? Did you want to cut them off? Interject? Did you? Did you feel in any way uncomfortable or emotionally unsafe? Finally, having reflected upon these questions, now I think you're ready to ask yourself, do you consider yourself to be a good listener? Now you can open your eyes. These are some very powerful questions, and perhaps you can journal around some of them later, because you can go extremely deep and come to some very important realizations here. Just want you to know this. Where there is a lack of listening or ineffective communicating, there is a sense of distance between people. Often, when we don't pay attention to the needs of others, this leads to conflict and disconnection. And this also creates a lack of safety between people, which really breaks things down. Now, according to spiritual teacher and psychologist Tara Brach and Buddhist research, there are some very common interrupters of deep listening that distort and hijack our listening. Allow me to share some of the most important ones with you. Our filters. We all have filters, and they determine what we are listening for. We don't just listen, it's what we're listening for, so that we can't see reality for what it is. We have agendas. We have certain things that we want, certain things that we dislike, certain things that we fear. And wanting things to be a certain way narrows the aperture of our attention so that we're much less receptive. And it also tightens us physically. And when we are afraid of or dislike what people are saying, we try to protect ourselves, and so we pull back. And we often then get defensive or aggressive. And I'm sure that all of us can relate to this. When we feel threatened, hurt, offended, judged, or blamed, we oftentimes shut down and can't pay attention. For example, when someone disagrees with you, it's almost like there's a threat to your rightness, and we can't listen. Does any of this resonate? Any of this make sense? Let's be honest with ourselves here. We have unconscious filters. We have unconscious agendas that I'm trying to now make you aware of. Fran Lebowitz wrote, "The opposite of talking is not listening, it's waiting." We listen to reply. We don't listen to understand. But listening is a precious capacity that we can cultivate. One of my favorite poets, Mark Nepo, says in his book about listening that to listen is to lean in softly with a willingness to be changed by what we hear. How many of us listen to lean in softly so we can be changed by what we hear? How many of us listen so that we can change someone else so that they can hear what we want them to hear? I think that's a little bit more accurate. According to Brock, deep listening has to begin with awareness. You have to first define your current listening patterns and set your intentions to deepen them, so that we can learn over time how to listen to understand and how to listen to connect. As soon as conversations begin, what you have to do is listen within yourself so that you can see what is showing up for you. it's the agendas, or is it the criticism, or is it the urge to fix because of course you're always right? Or is it the fears or the wants? But you need to just notice what's arising. And that's the mindfulness piece. That's where we say mindful relating. Your job is to listen to what matters to other people. So it's important to be able to direct and ask honest questions like, what is it that you'd like me to know or understand? Or what can I do that would help you right now? You see, it's a real human need to be listened to. And it's a part of a greater human need to feel seen, heard, and understood. And many of us are accustomed to a particular kind of listening, which has been referred to as predatory listening for a reason. Predatory. And what this means is we're listening with a narrow, hypercritical focus. We want to find fault. We want to confront. We want to catch you. We want to call you out. This is a kind of predatory listening, waiting for something to be offended by, to jump on, to prove someone wrong, to preach a specific view. There is this deep, deep yearning amongst a lot of us to be right. Now, the problem with this is the needs of the listener to be right, to prove something, overshadow the relational values like the understanding, like connecting, like being able to heal one another. How do we help each other heal? How do we serve another? By connecting with them and understanding them, by dancing with them where they are, by shifting out of the offensive, predatory listening into a more curious listening that I'm going to define for you now, that is called non-defensive listening. So this is going to be a little different for you, but different can be good. So if you again can close your eyes for a moment, I just want you to imagine, just imagine having a conversation with someone who disagrees with you. And instead of getting angry, getting curious about their perspective. Imagine how that would even look in the political realm. Or imagine hearing someone expressing their hurt and pointing their finger at you as the culprit, the cause of their hurt, and not having to defend yourself. Imagine rather being able to listen and actually hear everything that is being said about you. Well, this is what we call non-defensive. And that's what it is in a nutshell. And I'm sure that feels difficult to visualize, and you can open your eyes now, but I'm going to explain it in a deeper way. But it's so important for so many reasons. Why? Why can't we just listen the way we've been listening? Well, because this kind of non-defensive listening that I would like you to build this skill, number one, helps people to feel psychologically safe so they can freely express themselves. It allows for perspective taking so that we can better try to understand each other's perspective or position. It allows you to engage with someone where they are rather than trying to change them towards your truth. It helps you to find common ground and listen for what you do agree with versus what you disagree with. And finally, non-defensive listening also affects your speech, and it's at the heart of offering a sincere apology. Now, I get that this kind of listening is difficult because sure, I too have been there. It's incredibly difficult to listen to someone's pain when that someone is accusing us of causing it. We automatically listen for and react to what is unfair and what is incorrect. But to listen with an open heart, to listen and to ask curious questions to better help us understand the other person, well, this is in fact a spiritual practice in the truest sense of the word. So what I'd like you to do again, if possible, is close your eyes. And I would like you to take you through a scenario. And I want you to imagine, I'm sure you've had many difficult conversations in your lifetime. I can say that we all have. And I'd like you to imagine that you're having a difficult conversation with someone. You may be able to very quickly bring someone to mind, and that you are on the receiving end of their criticism. And I want you to try implementing some of the following strategies and see how they resonate in your mind. There's nothing for you to memorize here. Don't worry that I'm giving you, I'm reciting a kind of script, but all I want you to do is feel into the experience of how it feels to listen non-defensively. What does this really look like and feel like? So imagine you've just started a difficult conversation. Someone is speaking to you about how you've hurt or upset them, and you're there listening. So what the first thing is important to do is just become aware of your listening patterns and recognize when you're using them. Just notice some of your filters. Are you in agenda mode? Are you getting defensive? Just try to catch yourself and be aware. And breathe. And just remind yourself to breathe, because defensiveness always starts in the body. It makes you tense and tight and unable to take in new information. So you need to breathe so you can calm and regulate your nervous system. And then you need to remind yourself, okay, I'm here to listen, to understand. Listen to understand. Okay, Terri, do not interrupt. Don't argue. No refuting, no correcting facts. No bringing up your own criticisms. Save that another time. Ask questions. Ask questions to clarify what you don't understand. Because if the criticism is vague, you may need to ask for something more concrete. You want to clarify to show the other person you care. But the key is to be curious, not cross-examine with your questions. But listen to this line. You want to ensure that message sent equals message received. You want to make sure that the message they have sent is the message that you're receiving. Also, it's important to find something you can agree with. You may only agree with 3% of what the other person is saying, but just seek to find common ground. Then, if appropriate, apologize for your part. And this just shows that you're able to take responsibility. And it helps to shift the exchange from combat to collaboration. Then you want to let the offended person know that he or she has been heard and that you're going to keep thinking about this conversation. You can say something like, it's not easy to hear what you're telling me, but I want you to know that I'm going to give it a lot of thought. And then you can thank that person for sharing. And you can also take the initiative to bring the conversation up in the future, saying something like this. I've been thinking about our conversation last week, and I'm so glad we had that talk. I'm wondering if there's more you haven't told me. But you need to remember these few things. Always draw the line at insults. There have to be boundaries in place, and if they're crossed, you need to set up a possibility for another conversation by saying, I really want to hear this, but I need you to approach me with respect, and that's not happening right now. You also need to remember that you don't listen when you can't listen well. So, if you can't listen and you're not absorbing, you need to let the person know that. And finally, remember that apologizing for your part in something doesn't mean that you passively accept criticism or that something that you believe is wrong or unjust. Once you've apologized for your part, later when you're telling your story at another time, you let the other person know where you see things differently. The point is, we just need to save that point of view for a future conversation. So, just to reinforce what I have said, the important thing is not for you to remember all of this. I really just want you to get the gist of how it is, instead of feeling accused or hijacking a difficult conversation, the importance of seeking to understand what the other person is feeling and why. So you take responsibility for your part and help the other person to feel seen and heard. But what's invaluable here is that this builds trust, safety, and the desire to connect. Imagine your spouse, your child, your colleagues feeling safe, feeling trusting, and feeling the desire to connect with you. How much nicer those communications would be if you show them that you can listen to them no matter what. So we all know that it takes tremendous effort to sit on the hot seat and only listen. But again, that's when you really, really have to listen deeply and communicate effectively. So as an aside, I've said a lot here, and there's a lot to digest, but it is important to move and always stretch the body when you're sitting for too long. So if you ever feel the need to just get up and move for a moment, while I'm talking, please do. It's always good for the mind and brain. So my intention is to offer the content tonight in a sequence that will best serve you. So first, it's important to be able to listen non-defensively so you can hear someone's upset and you can learn how to dial down your defensiveness. But the next step is to be able to apologize for having said or done something that felt wrong to another person. So now we're going to segue into deeper apologizing. So again, this may be a difficult topic, and it's all right. Just allow whatever is coming up, embrace what you like, let go of the rest. But these are important things that will lead us into forgiveness. To apologize means to accept responsibility for an offense or grievance and to express remorse in a direct or personal way and promise not to do it again. So for an apology to be genuine, you need to not repeat the wrongdoing, and the conversations need to continue to build a level of trust. Sorry won't cut it if it's insincere, but genuine apologies can open the door to forgiveness, and they can open the door to healing. Now, the truth is we are all apology challenged with certain people and in some situations. But the skill we want to build is how to craft a deeply meaningful apology. But to do that, we first have to understand the 5 ways that ruin an apology. When you add this little word "but" onto an apology, for example, "I'm so sorry I yelled at you, but you made me so angry," even if that statement is true, that made you so angry, just undoes the whole apology. "I'm sorry you feel that way." Again, another pseudo apology. A true apology keeps the focus on your behavior only. And almost any apology that begins with "I'm sorry if," again, another tiny add-on word that turns your "I'm sorry" into "I'm not really sorry at all." "I'm sorry, but," "I'm sorry if," they don't cut it. And this is so, so important to understand. Never view your apology as an automatic ticket to forgiveness. No, I apologize doesn't mean Okay, I accept that apology and you're forgiven. Absolutely not. I'm sorry should not be viewed as a bargaining chip you give to get something back like forgiveness. We have to give people the emotional space and time to sit with the anger and the pain and the apology and to arrive or not arrive at a place of genuine forgiveness. And finally, never apologize to someone who doesn't want to hear another word from you, because that's called an intrusive apology. So I'll just give you a couple of examples of a sincere apology. I'm sorry, I corrected your story at the party. I get it, and I won't do it again. I'm sorry that I haven't really listened to you and that I've so often refused to talk about things that matter to you. That was wrong, and I'm working on changing that. So if you can see, there's a 3-step process. You first are acknowledging your inappropriate behavior, and by that, you're owning it. And then you're showing the other person that you get them. So, yes, I heard you, I see you, I understand you. And finally, you are to ensure that you will not repeat the wrongdoing. Now, the best way to teach your children or grandchildren or anyone how to apologize is to model the behavior by offering a heartfelt apology yourself. I say, if you don't apologize to your child, why should your child apologize to you? Some parents feel very reluctant to apologize. They think that it undercuts their authority and it makes them look weak or uncertain. But the opposite, in fact, is true. It reflects an important value, a concern for fairness. It shows children that their parents can admit to being wrong without being lesser people for it. Now, the ability to apologize is really one of the greatest gifts we can give to our children and to each other. I'm going to say it's absolutely the same in relationships. It's really a recipe for success. It's a gift to your spouse to be able to initiate an apology on your part, just owning your part in the problem. But married couples so often get stuck in negativity and blame, and it becomes this kind of circular dance. So we want change, but we don't want to change first. We want to apologize, but we don't want to apologize first. Now, apologizing for our part is a good thing to do when we know what our part is, but obviously an apology is not enough. One needs to also change this entrenched way of behaving under stress. Also, when offering an apology, your word choice is very critical. Now, relational mindfulness speaks to becoming more mindful and aware of the way you're relating and communicating with other people. That is how you're listening, the words that you're speaking and choosing, even, your nonverbal cues. So speech is another very important way to help people to feel safe and trusting. And there's so much that I want to say about speech and word choice, but given the depth of that training, it has to be reserved for another workshop. So now we're just going to finish by delving into this topic of forgiveness. So again, one more time, it's probably the last. I'd like you to close your eyes and reflect upon the following questions. What does forgiveness mean to you? How do you know when you have forgiven someone? What are the signs and signals that tell you you have fully forgiven? The signs and signals that tell you you're in the process of forgiving? Is there someone in your life you want or feel the need to forgive? What's the difference between forgiving and letting go? Finally, think of a moment about the concept of self-forgiveness and ask yourself, Do you give yourself permission to forgive yourself when necessary? Some people say that self-forgiveness is the hardest kind of forgiveness. Now open your eyes, and again, I'm hoping that you'll be able to journal around some of these questions later. I just want to share some commonly held ideas from forgiveness experts and religious leaders about what forgiveness really is. Well, some say the act of forgiveness is actually the greatest virtue. It's the highest form of love, and it's necessary for good mental and physical health. They say that only forgiveness can free the injured party from holding on to their anger and hatred. But some people do not accept these blanket statements. And in truth, there is no one size fits all definition. And there are many paths to healing that do not require forgiveness. So, some misconceptions about forgiveness. People often think they're talking about forgiveness and they use the word, I'm going to forgive that person. But what they're really talking about is ridding themselves of the burden of anger or bitterness or resentment. I want to forgive often translates into, I want to get past this. I want to find some peace of mind. Words or phrases like resolution, detachment, moving on, letting go. These may in fact better describe what people are looking to do. So from a Buddhist perspective, the essence of forgiveness is in fact letting go. And letting go doesn't mean forgetting or forgiving the other person's bad behavior. It just means protecting ourselves from the toxic effects of staying stuck in grudges or resentment. Chronic anger and bitterness sap us of our energy and creativity. And if we're stuck in the past, we can't inhabit the present or move forward into a future. But the key is whether we have experienced a small hurt or a big betrayal, we do not need to forgive the actions of an unapologetic offender to find peace of mind. But we do need over time to melt the emotional charge. We need to accept the reality that sometimes the wrongdoer is unreachable, unrepentant, or perhaps even no longer alive. And we have a choice as to whether we continue to carry the wrongdoing on our shoulders or not. Some people even believe in radical forgiveness, which means they'll forgive anything and they will even send those people blessings. Most of us can't even deal with regular forgiveness, let alone radical forgiveness. But the key is you can reach a place of love and compassion for a wrongdoer without forgiving a particular action or inaction. And you are not a less loving or whole person if there are certain things that you do not forgive and certain people who you choose not to see. Many people believe that forgiveness is something that needs to be earned. Know this, forgiveness is never all or nothing. The truth is you can forgive someone 95% and you can forgive someone 5% or anywhere in between. I remember reading about a couple in this book I was reading about a husband who had an affair, and they were in therapy together, and the husband asked his wife, "Do you forgive me?" And this was after, a long, long time, lots of therapy. And she said, "Yeah, I forgive you 90%. She claimed her 10%. And that was enough for the marriage to move forward. But we wonder, how is it that she was able to let that go? And a quote I want to read to you is what this relationship expert told the man to do. And I read it to you for a reason, because it's so important for each and every one of us to integrate this with someone else. Become committed to hearing your wife's rage and sorrow for as long as it takes. Take in her pain and carry it. Initiate conversations with her. Check in on her to see how she's doing and let her know how you're continuing to think about how terribly you hurt her. Don't leave her alone with her pain or with the responsibility to keep the conversation going. If you're not able to hear her pain, take it, hold it, and pay attention to it. She won't heal. I'm sorry, please forgive me, isn't going to cut it, even if repeated 1,000 times. So I share this example with you because it so clearly demonstrates how forgiveness can be such a delicate process that unfolds over time with great effort and consistency. And we have to learn how to offer this for others so we can help them by holding their pain. None of this is natural for us. Not non-defensive listening, not genuine apologizing, not forgiveness like this. But these are all skills that we can cultivate and muscles that we can build over time with practice. So tonight's topics deserve a lot of time, energy, and discussion. And having done this workshop a few times now, the most common feedback is that it's both ear and eye opening. Yes, pun intended. There is a great deal to process here, but you have a lifetime to do so. So you get to sit with these topics if they speak to you and let them marinate. And hopefully with time, they'll guide you towards greater clarity, and you'll have a sense of things you want to prioritize or change moving forward. But the place to begin is simply to become more intentional, more aware of how to listen non-defensively, how to speak with intention and taste the words before you spew them, how to pause, breathe, and own your own part in every conflict, how to offer a genuine apology and forgive in a way that feels best for you. So now that I'm done tonight's presentation, and before I close with a poem that I've written and our Q&A, I want to take a minute or two just to speak to you briefly about some of my offerings. So I offer one-night presentations, just introductory workshops like these for schools and community centers and organizations, and the topics vary. I also offer more intensive weekly series, like 4 or 6 week workshops. I offer family and private workshops, and I also offer one-on-one phone coaching. And I'd be happy to share more details with you. And I'd also be happy to share my monthly blog and notifications of my upcoming workshops. So please, if you're interested in any of these and you're not yet on my mailing list, please go to the chat box and add your name and your email now. And I would be happy to add you to my email list. And what I blog around and teach and coach around is far greater than this particular topic. If you've heard Drop Your Anchor, it speaks to the emotional piece. And this one I thought was important for us to learn more about the interpersonal as we're going out into the world right now. You can also feel free to just go to my website. I have copy and pasted my information in the chat box as well, but it's mindscholar.ca, mindscholar.ca. And I want to share with you that I've also written a couple of books. So if you're interested in reading any of them, by all means, be in touch with me. I can mail them or talk to you about them. And believe it or not, I have now decided to write book 3. That has been a COVID push. There's been a lot of emotions that have come up and a lot of reflection and much new writing, because I have chronic pain and I'm not able to do a lot, and I do have a lot of limitations. Writing has always been a cathartic and beautiful process for me. So I want to finish with a poem that I wrote in the middle of May, and it's very, very applicable to this topic. And it's called A Kind Witness. A broken appliance needs fixing, as does a broken toy. A leaky faucet poses a problem that needs solving. A body part that doesn't function well is in need of repair. A human being who feels broken is in need of healing. We may need therapy and coaching, medication and meditation, guidance and mentorship, new training and resources. But what we want most is to be felt, seen, heard, and understood, to be held where we are in our moment of suffering. We don't need someone to save us, to fix us, solve us, to repair our brokenness. We want someone to feel with us, to walk beside us. We secretly crave a kind witness. But in a world full of doers, they are few and far between. Observing is slow and time-consuming. Solving is faster and far easier. Control is empowering. Who really wants to sit with discomfort? Who wants to hear your sadness, feel your grief, be with your anger? Who even has the time? People would rather judge than be curious, advise than listen, defend than soothe, comment than accept. But all we want is a simple script. I see your tears and your sadness. I hear your fear and your worry. I understand your anger and aversion. We want others to affirm our feelings. That must really hurt. How painful that must feel. That sounds so difficult. Tell me more. When people can mirror back to us what we are feeling, we can see they're paying attention. We can feel them feeling us. The nerve gets exposed, and we take in the emotions together. The energy is shared and released. We are no longer alone. We feel safe and connected. We can build a trusting space, a secure attachment, a way to co-regulate with another. We can belong. I hear your sorrow and I love you. I see your sadness and I'm here for you. If your tears could speak, what would they be saying? Tell me about it. This goes against human nature. People are inclined to get caught in the minutia, in the details, the stories, the interpretations, to feel accused and to defend, to take something personally and to attack back, to want to be right and in control. But mankind pays a huge price for this. Our emotions get lost in the shuffle, consumed by the drama. They retreat within and continue to hide, once again feeling unseen, unheard, forever misunderstood. This can feel like a life sentence, but there is another option. People can unlearn and relearn how to stop doing and start being, how to witness rather than throw a life preserver, to focus less on the content and on what is being said and more on the feelings that are being shared, offering one another room for unbridled self-expression, never abusive, but with boundaries in place. Sometimes we just need to empty our vessels with another person. We're hungry to share our emotions. We want nothing more than for others to observe the nerve, but not treat it, expose the vulnerability, but not fix it, to tend and befriend, and accompany us in our suffering mindfully and compassionately. Together, in sickness and in health, in our darkest and in our brightest moments. So simple, yet so profoundly healing, soothing, and nurturing. The gift of kind witnessing, feeling you, feeling me. So if there's only one thing you take away from tonight's lecture, let it be this. Remember the power of the pause that will allow you to breathe, slow things down, and be a kind witness for yourself or for someone who needs you. And as Master Suzuki Roshi said, the most important thing is remembering the most important thing. I thank you, and I encourage your questions in our Q&A. Sorry if I went a little over.
Not at all. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation and a beautiful poem at the end. We'll now move into questions. So if anyone would like to ask a question anonymously, please feel free to send me your question and I will ask it for you. Otherwise, put it in the chat and I'll call on you and you can actually ask your question out loud. So our first question is anonymous. The question is, much of our communication during the pandemic has not been in person, but via text or email. Do your techniques for conscious communication change when you can't be face to face?
Great, great question. I mean, the truth of the matter is, you're still speaking through a text, and the other person on the other end is still listening and then sending something back. So, whatever we are communicating through, whatever platform we are using, there is still speaking and listening. And we still have to slow down and pay attention. Sure, there's more chance for miscommunication when we are not face to face, but God willing, now that we are all slowly getting our second vaccines, we will be able to get out into the world and practice. Listen, it's all about practice, but it's all about becoming more intentional, slowing down, and any way of communicating. I mean, sure, I'd much prefer to receive an apology in person than an apology in a text. I'd much prefer to discuss important things with you about how I felt hurt and betrayed. I would much prefer to choose to have that conversation over face to face, but even a phone call versus text, here's where we get to use our, understanding of life and the tools that we have to see what is possible and where and how we can communicate more intentionally. Did that help in some way? I hope.
Thank you. We have a couple questions from Murray. So Murray, if you'd like to unmute and go ahead and ask, please do that now. Okay, it looks like maybe he wrote it in the chat, so I will just go ahead and I will ask those. So he asked, if the perpetrator of an offense tries to become the victim and demand an apology from you, should you apologize or rather make them account for their misbehavior?
A really great question, and a really personal question. I don't like the word should. And, this is a spiritual practice. Again, there are many paths to healing. So honestly, you have to take that into your hands to decide what part you are accountable for. Victim, perpetrator, people can manipulate, change things around. There's your story, their story, there's, how it's interpreted. And honestly, for you, the point is you want to release the emotional charge. You want to open your heart and find compassion. Whatever is the best way for you to do that, you have to figure that out.
Great. There's another question that discusses the having faith in spirituality in God and how that might sync with your advice and guidance.
With respect to what in particular?
The question addresses daily guidance and inner calm that comes from a faith in God, and which enables you to not internalize negative, harmful.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, me personally, my faith in God is very strong. I have spiritual practices. My day begins with prayer, finishes with prayer. And for me, faith it's like this life, this journey is a co-creation. And this whole, the ability to forgive, the ability to apologize, the ability to find self-compassion, be my kind witness. There are times when I can't actually find compassion for myself. So in that case, I find an anchor. And that anchor might be my dear Zadie Jack, who passed decades ago, or my darling mother, who passed 11 years ago, or dear God, who may just hold me or kiss me on the brow and offer me the courage and the confidence I need in that moment to get through, to navigate my way through that situation. Faith is everything, not everything. It's huge, but I've also wrestled with my faith because I've had intense challenges that I have dealt with over my lifetime. So faith doesn't mean that we don't wrestle with God. It also means that we converse and we appeal and we praise. And it's such an unbelievably complicated and complex spiritual practice. And it's a very personal one. And sometimes I have to unburden something that feels too heavy and hand it over to God and say, please hold this for me, or help me to forgive, or, so for me, huge.
Thank you. So, a question about forgiving yourself. You had mentioned that can be the hardest thing. Do you have strategies around speaking and communicating with yourself in order to apologize and forgive almost on a one-sided communication?
So self-talk is probably my number one tool. I use it when I wake up, as soon as I've said my Modéani, and, I try to start with that priming of the brain with positive, good morning, darling. I try to talk to myself as sweetheart, this and that, but so many times we beat ourselves up, and we have to pause and acknowledge that. And when it comes to making mistakes, and when it comes to having hurt people, or, the things that we've done wrong, I certainly have to hold ourselves in those moments and acknowledge this is a moment of suffering. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I forgive myself in this moment. I have to literally hold my hand on my heart and the other hand on my belly. And I have to acknowledge and recognize how painful this feels. And I can't get to self-forgiveness until I get to self-compassion. And I can't get to self-compassion until I get to self-like. And I can't get to self-like until I get to self-appreciation or self-awareness. You see, there's a continuum that goes from self-loathing all the way to self-love. And if you are stuck at that end of the spectrum, you certainly can't come even close to self-forgiveness or self-compassion. But if you realize that your greatest gift to yourself is not to be your enemy or to be your bully, but in fact to be your good friend, then you will realize that you can slowly and gradually take yourself down that spectrum, because there will be no one other than God who will be there for you at 3 a.m. But even at that time, you may not feel like you're being held. You are the only person who you can ask yourself to please. May I be kind to myself in this moment of suffering. May I soften. May I tenderize. May I meet my edge and soften. Self-talk is, again, huge.
That's great. We have another question around tips you might have for re-entering the world socially after the pandemic, and how do we combat that anxiety, especially with people that we haven't seen in a while?
Yeah, so that was my last workshop, which is called, it's how we anchor and how we ground ourselves and our emotional awareness. And absolutely, going back out right now for me, for everyone, because not only did I live from a teenager with chronic pain and still move through a bunch of these things, but with that came anxiety and mild OCD. So believe you me, this is a journey that I study science, I study psychology, I build this toolkit first for me, and then I share it with the world. Going out into the world right now for me, I am doing one tiny baby step at a time. And my adolescent children who range from 23 to 28, they're just jumping back. They're, double vaccinated, ready to go to patios, ready to go here, ready to meet this one, ready for that, booking vacations. I'm not there. And I have had conversations with people my age, in their 50s, and their 40s, 60s, 70s, 80s. We're not ready quite so quickly to go out there, but yet we know that we have to. We know that we need to. We know that we will. And we know that it's a gradual process. And we also know that we have a toolkit. And we need to prepare ourselves with that toolkit. And when we go out there and we are starting to feel panicky, the first thing we need to do is go into the body and get grounded, as I taught in Drop Your Anchor. We need to ground ourselves with a script by feeling our feet on the ground, wiggling our fingers, seeing, hearing, telling ourselves we're safe and okay. So we have grounding things, we have self-talk. We have to understand, okay, where am I? Is my body, is my nervous system a problem, or am I just disturbed and irritated, or am I really, really scared? And depending on the emotions that we're feeling, we tap into specific tools from those that are as, strong as doing all the grounding and, anchoring processes, all the way up to, the all of these other tools like the self-talk where we just go into the mind. The breath is everything. Again, the moment you take 3 deep breaths, you are literally calming your nervous system. I have a client I'm working with right now who's over the top, and we've worked on the simple, really, really tiny 3-step process. The first thing she has to do is pause. The second thing is a box breath. By that, I mean, just imagine a box and the 4 sides. The first side is breathe in for 4 seconds. The next side is hold it for 4. Third side, breathe out for 4. Fourth side, hold it for 4. Then feel your feet anchored. Imagine you're a tree and your feet are grounded and anchored like the roots of a tree. Hold your heart and say, everything is going to be okay. 4-step process. That's one universal. It gives you the mindfulness. It gives you the compassion. And when you hold yourself, you're literally nurturing yourself, telling yourself, I can do this. Everything's going to be okay. And if none of this works, you get a therapist, you entertain the fact that you may want to go on a medication. But the point is, we're all going to get back. We're all going to go back, but hopefully we're going to remember the lessons. We're not going to go back too quickly. We're not going to change everything back to the way it used to be. And we're going to get through this. And you may want some coaching, because this is something that I do and love, and I'm passionate about helping people in this capacity.